I name you Captain of the Nimbus. Order your ship to
Fire!
This episode is a lot better than I thought it was going to be. And while I laughed a lot, probably the most I have so far this season, I was most impressed by the commentary in this episode. Now before we get started, just a quick content warning for the video. There are light discussions of sexual harassment as this episode is about being cancelled. Though, it's worth pointing out, and that's the end of the warning, they don't take a specific Me Too style approach here, opting for a more general cancellation of Zapp. The episode mixes in various elements from different aspects of... I'm actually going to have to use this term in this video a lot, aren't I? Just imagine every time I say this, I say so-called before I say cancel culture. Sorry. Cringing about the labeling of this stuff aside, I think it is a good decision to keep Zapp's transgressions more broad. There's obviously plenty of established history if the episode wanted to make it just about sexual harassment.
The Army decided women weren't fit for service. Not when I'm in charge.
But the wider scope helps in a few ways. Zapp has always been a shithead, specifically to Kith, so it makes sense that he'd be the one to file charges against Brannigan. It's certainly abusive behavior, but it's not explicit sexual violence. If the episode opened with Zapp committing some sort of act of sexual violence, I certainly wouldn't want to see the character ever again. Or probably watch the episode for that matter. It's an incredibly heavy topic, and while it is important to discuss, it might be a little out of the weight class of an animated comedy show. There's certainly some sprinkled in, but more in the sex pest way rather than sexual assault. Both are bad, and one is definitely worse. But to reiterate, both are definitely bad. The episode does include additional sex pests in the other cancelled crew members. But once again, they keep it lighter. They're commenting on the public/media type of cancellation, like Mel Gibson, not the go to jail for being a fucking monster actual crimes type of cancellation like Bill Cosby, who totally didn't get out of jail on a technicality.
What a brilliant legal shenanigan. Case dismissed.
Overall, the broader approach allows the episode to comment on more, and equally as important, make more jokes. I made it pretty clear in the Mamazon and vaccine videos that I found both of those elements, comedy and commentary, to be lacking in both of those episodes. To my surprise and elation, this episode seemed to nail it. Well, almost nail it. There's a pretty big blunder around a very strange decision that doesn't tank the cancel culture commentary, but it definitely stands out as something that either needs to be left out or explored more. I'll get to that eventually, but I want to start with the positives this time because I feel like I've been pretty hard on what is actually my favorite show of all time.
He just won't stop with the social commentary.
As I've mentioned before, and have discussed at length in some of my other videos, the commentary this season has been bland, empty, and devoid of any real meaning. This episode, on the other hand, throws down, at least a little bit, ultimately giving us a look at how cancel culture is kinda bullshit and serves both the offender and the organization they work for. Okay, it might be a bit much to say that being canceled helped Zapp, but we do know dishonorable discharge could have been the alternative. We've seen Zapp kicked out of the dupe before, and we see Leela discharged later in the episode too. I'll talk about Leela's dismissal in a moment, but my point here is Zapp maintains his position at dupe and regains his rank upon reinstatement. We aren't told up front, but the cancellation was always temporary.
Your 8-hour sensitivity training is complete.
And this is whether or not the intended results were achieved. And of course, it's not supposed to be a punishment. Ideally, it's a rehabilitation. But all 4 canceled crew members are reinstated before any of them learn lessons or change their behavior.
I now know there's a difference between right and wrong. One of them gets you cancelled.
This is an abridged and obvious version of the typical apology offered up by canceled individuals in the real world. It's an apology for the action, not the overall behavior of the person that led to that action. Oftentimes, the case being singled out is part of a larger trend. That's certainly the situation for Zapp Brannigan. This is the first time he's been reprimanded for his behavior, but he's always been like this. He didn't learn to correct his behavior, he just learned he shouldn't get caught. I don't know if you remember what Mel Gibson got canceled for back in 2010, but it was fucking bad. Like the kind of shit you don't say unless you feel a certain way deep in your core. Racist. That certain way is racist. Also anti-Semitic. Mel Gibson revealed himself to be hella fucking racist back in 2010. And thankfully, he was canceled permanently. As long as you ignore the fact that he was in like 6 movies last year, is supposed to direct Lethal Weapon 5 soon, and is currently directing a sequel to The Passion of the Christ. But I'm sure he's not still anti-Semitic, right? Canceling people, it's not real. Like I said, this episode kinda nails this commentary. People get canceled when the controversy outweighs their usefulness or profitability, but they'll get picked right back up as soon as that ratio flips.
I hereby reinstate you as captain of the Nimbus. Order your ship to fire.
They don't care whether or not you're rehabilitated as long as you serve the function. Granted, the dupe's attempts at rehabilitating the canceled crew aren't realized due to Dr. Kind's takeover. But it's pretty clear the entire process is just an exercise in going through the motions. They don't care at all about the whole situation as long as it keeps up appearances.
You put in an application to be a dupe pilot?
Yeah. Like an hour ago?
You're hired.
So let's shift gears and talk about the dupe's role in all of this, because they bear a lot of responsibility for what's going on here. Glab shows throughout the episode that the dupe is much more concerned about keeping up appearances than they are about actually fostering a healthy work environment.
Also, we want to show we care about looking like we care about hiring women.
She knows that they don't even have to actually show that they care about hiring women. All they have to do is virtue signal. But when you're not actually living up to the statements you're making, that messaging quickly becomes a superficial attempt to curry favor.
The dupe is rebranding to project an image of peaceful exploration rather than war.
We see this happen frequently throughout Leela's time captaining the Nimbus. Glab does allow Leela to bring fresh ideas to the table, but when push comes to shove, the dupe is in charge and Leela needs to fall in line. Bringing diverse voices into an organization not only raises up these voices, but it also provides a fresh perspective to the organization, allowing it to serve a broader group of people. But if those new ideas are suppressed by the older systems in place, it doesn't matter who's making those decisions. Ultimately, the decision maker is the dupe, not Leela, just like it wasn't Zapp. Removing him from command changes nothing except the outward appearance of what's going on.
Sometimes we coerce people with war. Other times, we take the high road and trick them with peace.
War leads to surrender, which leads to, in the most sarcastic of air quotes, peace. Just as the refusal to sign a peace treaty leads to war and so on and so forth. The difference is only in how it's being presented. Peace seems nicer, but they're both extortion. There's no meaningful difference. I think the show really fumbled a big opportunity here with the peace treaty situation, so let's put a pin in that for now, because I want to wrap up this larger thought first. The superficial nature of Leela's hiring is put fully on display when Glab is pressuring Leela to be groped during the treaty signing. The dupe does not care about anybody's well-being. They care about their expansionist resource grabbing. They created the toxic environment that allowed Zapp and the other cancelmates to rise to prominence.
Act like a captain and start fondling knobs.
The system rewards these individuals for their toxic behavior. Why would they change? Later, when Leela refuses an order that endangers the lives of non-combatants, Glab immediately reinstates Zapp to get what she wants. And when that doesn't work, she goes right down the line to the even more toxic Dr. Kind to achieve her goal. The system doesn't want to be rid of these assholes, the system relies on these assholes. But this tactic is misguided and nearly results in the very disaster it was meant to avert. The icing on the cancel culture commentary cake is Leela's dishonorable discharge from the dupe. Her decision to defy orders and not fire on unarmed civilians is punished much more harshly than any of Zapp's transgressions. Much like Zapp, the dupe doesn't care about right and wrong. They just care about who will get them what they want.
These people are lovely, whatever. It's debatable. We're really here for the air.
Despite the fact that she saved the day, Leela's gotta go because she wouldn't follow orders. Sort of. She refuses to fire on civilians, sure, but it's kinda strange for them to use that as the line that she wouldn't cross, considering Zapp also refused that order too. It's particularly odd and unfortunate if you consider one of the earlier scenes, that opportunity that I mentioned earlier. Leela initially takes issue with the treaty the dupe wants her to coerce the Tactilians into signing. And while it starts as a subject of contention for her,
So, this peace mission isn't really about peace?
it's simply explained away and goes unchallenged throughout the rest of the episode. Later, Leela seems eager to sign the treaty once she's covered in durian fruit. Without inspection, the inclusion just unapologetically normalizes imperialization of peoples deemed inferior by expansionists. Which is particularly bothersome because it's set up like it's going to be the tension that ultimately ends Leela's career with the dupe.
This is an amazing natural resource, Queen Aerie. You should do everything in your power to protect it.
It's wild that they have this opportunity, but Leela is more concerned about the weird groping ceremony than the aggressive imperialism. Don't get me wrong, Leela should not be forced to do something that makes her physically uncomfortable, but she could have taken a stance against both. I get it makes sense for the commentary they're going for. We're talking about cancel culture here, not imperialism and expansionism. In the treaty scene, Glab is creating the literal environment she's been signaling against the entire episode. It's very effective commentary. So if that's the direction you want to go in, just leave imperialism out of it. There was a great commentary cooking with cancel culture, and that imperialism bit wasn't exactly fundamental to the execution of the plot or that commentary. That said, while it's not absolutely necessary, I do think that the parallels that I mentioned earlier are interesting enough to be included in the episode. Whether it's Leela or Zapp in charge, the dupe is still going to be out threatening war disguised as peace. But that's part of the problem. They don't fully explore this idea that this peace is not peace at all.
Get out of our air!
The Tactilians are about to lose their sole natural resource, but we don't see the impact of that treaty. Is the peace that the dupe is offering actually peace? Or are the Tactilians going to be exploited while their planet is stripped of all of its natural resources? It's especially a bummer because they could have fixed this issue with a single scene that would have sent the message and been a cool callback to the first episode that ever featured Zapp Brannigan. Vergon 6 was a planet under dupe control that had a very valuable natural resource, dark matter. We find out in Bender's game that Vergon 6 was strip mined by Mom Corp until it imploded. Mom at the time was operating as a dupe contractor, so dupe literally has a history of strip mining planets until they implode. But the episode wants us to do the math for it, when they could have just closed the episode with the same Mom Corp ship that destroyed Vergon 6 slowly appearing behind this new planet. That would send a pretty clear message about the fate of the Tactilians, as well as the way the dupe operates in the name of so-called peace. It's a missed opportunity, that's all I'm saying. All in all though, the episode and the commentary, on cancel culture at least, were very solid. This would have been my favorite episode hands down if it weren't for the unapologetic imperialism, but honestly it might be a front runner regardless. It was a pretty good episode. This video turned out a little bit different this week. I usually like to talk about past episodes and how they handled things better, but this episode was surprisingly meaty enough on its own. If this wasn't your cup of tea, don't worry. This week's episode looks like it's an anthology, so we can dig through that whole legacy next Monday. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.